Everyone, this is Jono. I'm so thrilled to be speaking today at Open Source Lisbon 2020. Thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me to come and speak. I hope you're all safe and well wherever you may be. Now, I've been building communities now for about 20 years, and I thought today maybe I could do a session about some kind of best practices around how you build really amazing open source communities. I've learned so much over the course of my career working with Ubuntu at Canonical, with XPRIZE, with GitHub, and all the different companies I've worked with as a consultant. And I've learned so much from people who've just gone out there and tried different things. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of pull some of these things together in a format that I think will be very useful for you in whatever kind of communities you're building. Now, before we get into it, as a little bit of trivia that I'm almost certain you don't know, I have a bit of a soft spot for Portugal. And the reason why is because many years ago, I went to Evora in Portugal. I got invited to go and speak at an event there. And I was doing my talk, and then afterwards went out and had lunch with a group of people who were the speakers at the event. And one person that was there was this woman called Erica. Fast forward by about a year or so, and Erica and I got married. And we've been very happily married now for 12 years. In fact, if we had a girl, we have a boy, a son. If we had a girl, we're going to give her middle name to be Evora, out of respect for Evora ultimately bringing us together. So thank you, Portugal, for my marriage. Let's go to a different part of the world, though. Let's go to Northern England, because this is where I was born and raised. Northern England was and continues to be a very beautiful but quite boring place to live. And when I was growing up, I mean, it was boring for me as a kid. I'm sure it's fine if you're a grown-up living there now. But when I was a kid growing up, I kept hearing this mantra over and over again of people don't know their neighbors like they did back in the good old days. And the basic gist of this was the internet and video games and movies are taking away the sense of community. And this just wasn't my experience. I was hearing this when I was 16, 17, but over the course of the next 10 years or so, I saw the purest definition of community happening. And let me fast forward you through my career to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. So, when I was 18, my brother came home to visit, and he introduced me to Linux. I'd never heard of Linux. I found out it was this collaborative open source operating system. This was back in 1998. So I joined the open source community, and I felt the sense of giving back, this reciprocity, which I know is an important part of open source. So created a community called Linux UK, went to university and ended up starting a local Linux user group. And then that kind of got me meeting some people who introduced me to KDE, started participating in the KDE project, ended up going down to London. You can see me in the background there with the long hair. Went down to London where I met two guys who were starting a new magazine called Linux Format Magazine. I said to them, would you be open to me writing a couple of articles for your magazine? And they said, sure, but if it's not very good, then we're not going to publish them. That seemed like a reasonable deal. Started writing some articles about community going on all over the world in Linux. Wrote an article about a place called Open Advantage, which was based in Birmingham, near where I used to live. They offered me a job, went and worked there, and started really contributing a lot to different communities all over the UK. And that gave me an opportunity to go out and speak. Started speaking at different events all over the world. Got to know projects such as GNOME. Ended up starting a project called Jacosha, where we built an audio editor, built a little community there. And the reason why I'm going through this so quickly is to emphasize that everything that I just went through is the opposite of this statement, that people don't know their neighbors like they did back in the good old days. The opposite happened to me, and the opposite happened to thousands of people around the world who discovered open source and free software. And what I think is so powerful about this is that when you look into it, the reason why this happens is because fundamentally we're building communities, and a community is a network of minds. It's a network of ideas, talent, time, expertise that mesh together and create amazing things to happen. And that's kind of what I want to dig into in this session. Now, just as a quick reminder, as I go through this session, please pop your questions in. I'm going to try and answer as many as I can. I'd love to be able to answer your questions, so get your questions in, okay? Now, this network of minds, I think, is one of the most powerful elements of what makes human beings so special and so amazing. And it's this network of minds that's powered communities, that's created, communities such as Wikipedia, that has democratized knowledge and education. Of course, the global open source movement that's come together to make amazing technology resonate across the world. We've seen the maker revolution, where people have been able to build gadgets and gizmos and devices and software that runs on them. We've seen the democratization of funding. Many people, instead of going to a VC or taking out a bank loan, they're running Kickstarter campaigns and Indiegogo campaigns. And there are many examples of this all over the world. Harley Davidson built a community of 1,700 local user groups. Salesforce and SAP have built communities of over 1 million members. Star Citizen raised $250 million in funding for their community. Lego Ideas have their community suggest Lego sets, many of which have been made. And one of my favorite examples here is Hit Record, which was set up by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who the Emmy Award-winning actor, who, this might sound quite bizarre, actually contributed some content to this, my book, People Powered. This is a community where people come together to work on the same productions. Someone does the sound, someone does the green screen, someone creates the script, and they work together on productions, many of which have been shown at Sundance. It's this network of minds that makes it possible. Okay. Now, I've spent 20 years really working with many, many different types of communities: consumer products, security, technology, gaming, all kinds of different areas. But there's something special about open source. There's something really powerful about open source. Open source is where so many amazing communities have been built and where we've learned so much about how to build amazing communities. So I want to dig into some of the best practices that I've learned and that I've discovered over the course of my career, and what I've discovered from other people as well, that will help you to shape your open source communities. The first one is that the best experiences in life are journeys, okay? For example, many of you may have been to Disney World. And when you go to Disney World or Disneyland or whichever Disney you go to, from how you show up and how you park your car to how you buy your tickets to how you go around the park and, where the parades are and which restaurants you go to, everything is carefully designed to maximize your guest experience and then get as many people into the park as possible. It's the same thing with restaurants. If you go to a great restaurant, from how you show up and how you book your table and how you get your drinks and all the rest of it, everything's carefully designed. And the same thing with video games as well. It's if you start a new video game, the first level is typically picking up the controls and accomplishing a few simple tasks. It's a very, very carefully crafted experience. The key thing is that your community has to be more than this. It can't just be a GitHub repo. Okay, if you just put a GitHub repo up there and put some code in it, sure, that's fine. But we need to do more than that. We need to build a community, get people excited, engaged, give them a lot of value. That's what's going to build the best community experience for you. So the way I recommend we do this, and the way I recommend you do this, is to use something that I've developed over the course of my career called the Community Participation Framework. Okay, and this is something I cover in my book, People Powered. And it's fairly straightforward. So let me first of all get rid of me so you can see what's going on. We start out with our target audience, okay? Like, who are the people we want to design the community for? Is it engineers? Is it people who work in consumer products? Is it documentation writers? Is it marketing people? We think about who is our target audience. So let's say our target audience for our community is going to be developers, people to actually write code for our open source project. The next step is we need to get them to generating a piece of value and consuming a piece of value as quickly and as easily as possible, okay? Now, that star is the piece of value. So let's say the first piece of value that we want them to consume is going to be, downloading your software, setting it up and using it and doing something worthwhile with it, okay? So the first thing you're going to want to think about is what are the steps that are needed to get them to that first piece of value, right? A lot of projects, again, what they do is they basically just stick a GitHub repo up and they expect someone to figure it out. That's not going to work, okay? So first of all, for example, the first step is usually why should they go and download your software? The second step is going to be allow them to download it and make it easy to set up. The third step could be, how to learn how to use it, skills development. The fourth step is doing something simple. You get the drift, okay? And it basically leads you to experiencing that first piece of value. Now, what's critical about this is that a lot of communities out there, they make the software, but they don't simplify how people get started using it. And a lot of people get put off by that. And the way in which you generate more developers is you need developers to be able to be users before they become developers, okay? So the next step is once they've experienced that first piece of value, they typically go through 3 phases. They start out as casual members, then they become regular members of your community, and then some of them become core members. So let's zone in on this specific piece first, okay? Now, each of these 3 different areas of the the kind of the community journey, you need to apply different types of focus, okay? So when people are brand new to your community, they're figuring out how to get started using your software or contributing code to your project, they're casual members. They don't really know whether they're going to spend much time there. They've got a lot of imposter syndrome. They're nervous about looking silly. So the first phase, in the casual phase, is where you essentially help them to settle in. The second phase, in the regulars phase, is where you really focus on collaboration and allowing them to work with each other. And then the third phase, which is core, which is a small number of people will be extremely passionate about your community, want to spend as much time there as possible. Now, before we go into specifics about these three different phases, it should be noted that it takes about 2 months for people to go from casual to regular, because it takes about 2 months to build a habit. If you want to lose weight, if you want to drink less, if you want to exercise more often, it takes about 2 weeks to build that habit, okay? So the casual phase is critical. And this is what we focus on in the casual phase. It's all about access and relationships, okay? Let me bring me back. So this is about enabling a regular flow of education and support, right? So you want to make sure that it's really simple and efficient for people to solve problems when they get started with your community, that they can build relationships and they can develop some friendships, that you have great training webinars and programs. You can have instructional blog posts to get them started, maybe some mentoring. These are ways in which you just help people to settle in. It's like when you're brand new at a school and you have someone at the school who helps you to kind of find your way around the school and know where the classes are and things like that. Now, the second phase is the regulars phase, and this is where we focus on collaboration. So this is where you enable your members to really kind of engage with each other and collaborate as effectively as possible, okay? So this is about matchmaking people. If you have someone brand new in the community, maybe having someone kind of come and work with them to help them achieve something, more significant. It's where you help them set up sub-teams. So for example, you might want to set up a marketing team within your open source project, a docs team, a translations team. It's where you essentially say to your regulars who are now part and parcel of your project, how can you have an impact? How can we unlock that kind of impact, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on. You can have competitions and hackathons. There's all kinds of ideas to keep your community engaged. And then the final phase, which is the core members. These are the small number of people who are super excited about your community. This is all about involving and engaging them and helping them to shape the structure of your community. You see, the great thing is about human beings is when we feel part of something, when we feel like we've got the ability to shape what's around us, we feel more engaged in a greater level of ownership. Like if you work for a company and you can only sit in your cube and go through a to-do list, that's a lot more boring than, for example, if you work for a company and you can feel like you can influence the leadership and the direction on what you focus on. It's much more engaging. So you want these core members of your community to really, really feel like they can have a significant impact. So set up one-on-one sessions, involve them in, future planning and initiatives and features, bring them together in a private forum or a channel, unlock their creativity, get great feedback to make improvements. These are the kind of things you want to focus on. So if we go back to our community participation framework, you may be thinking to yourself, okay, Jono, well, that sounds all well and good, but how do we get people to go from the casual to the regular to the core? Well, this is where we focus on incentives. Incentives are a really, really important part of how we move people forward, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on, so let's just hang fire on that. Now, the second thing I'd recommend you think about is that, first of all, that community participation framework, this thing that I just talked about, is all about simplifying how people come and join your community and get involved. But we really want to design the actual community for people, because that's who joins communities. And this is important for a few different reasons. The first one is that the ultimate treasure in a community is belonging. When someone joins a community, they feel a sense of belonging, that they're part of something, that they'd be missed if they went away, then that's an amazing experience for them, okay? So the goal that you've got is to get people to that sense of belonging. Now, what I would recommend you do is you start out with access, because access will ultimately lead to belonging. These are the two this is the in point and the out point of what we're focusing on. So when people have open access to the tools and the education that they need, which is what you give them in the onboarding experience, that enables them to easily contribute. And when they're able to contribute to your community, they're able to build a sense of self-respect. Like they have some kind of value. And when they have that sense of self-respect and they're able to build a sense of dignity, right? Because here's the thing about human psychology is that when you can contribute and shape something that other people respect, it builds your self-respect. When you keep doing this over and over again, you contribute, you have self-respect, you contribute, you have self-respect, it builds a sense of dignity that you've got inherent value in the world, that you bring value, that you're making the world a better place. And when you feel that sense of dignity and you're empowered to contribute, it enables you to have an impact. And what I mean by that is, it's just like when you join a new company, for example. Many of you will have experienced this. You join a new company and you're very careful about what you're suggesting to people because you don't want to feel like you're overstepping your bounds. But then when you feel part of the team and you feel like the company respects you and you're a key part of the company and you're a key part of the organization, then you feel very comfortable having bigger ideas and suggesting bigger things and challenging your leadership. That's what makes human systems better. It's that sense of impact. And when you can build that sense of impact and experience the results of it, that's what builds belonging. Now, the tricky thing here, my friends, and again, just as a reminder, get your questions in the chat if you've got any questions, which I'll aim to get to, is that the human brain looks like this. It's full of distractions and junk, right? It's the latest PlayStation, the latest Xbox, it's the Tiger King, it's whatever's going on in politics right now. There's lots of things to distract us away from things that add real value to our lives. So this all begs the question, what makes people want to try something new? Like, why should they come and join your open source community? And the answer is relatively straightforward here, is that it provides clear value. Okay, so one thing that's really critical here when you're thinking about your open source communities is to demonstrate what value it brings to their lives. So I'll give you an example of this. I think Firefox is a really good example, right? Is that they made very clear, especially in the early days of Firefox, that the mission was an open web, okay? Back in the early days of Firefox, people were building crop circles in the Firefox logo. They were doing fundraisers to, buy a full page ad in the New York Times with all of these contributors' names on there. It was all about the mission and the purpose. And the thing is, this actually carries through to today. So, for example, if you look at the screenshot here, it doesn't tell you about all of the the numbers about how many participants they've got, how many downloads they've got, all of those kinds of things. Look what it says. Firefox will tell you what's been blocked. It will make your passwords portable. It will watch for data breaches. It tells you the value that Firefox brings into your life, okay? And this is really important, is that we need to be able to get over what our projects, what our communities are going to do for people. And that could be, it's going to make people grow their skills, be better at technology. It's going to help them to get a job. It's going to help them to make friends, to have fun. These are all reasonable things. We've got to express the value. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have enough time to dig into like how you can really map that across lots of different areas. But this is one tip I would definitely give you, is the key to, if you want to bring value to anybody, whether it's your audience, whether you want to get people to read your blog posts, listen to your podcast, use your software, is to solve their pain. Think about your audience and what pain they experience. And instead of saying, here's some new cool things that you can do, say, this thing will help to relieve your pain, right? So, for example, instead of having a blog post that says, here are some tips for being energy conscious, right? Around solar and things like that. I would much rather have a blog post that says, here are 5 ways to reduce your electricity bill. You see, the first example is, here's how you can be more energy conscious. That's saying, here's how you can become a better version of you. But what is everybody wrestling with today? That their energy bill is too expensive, that their electric bill is too expensive. So if you went with the second blog post, it's relieving their pain, that's going to be more likely to get them on the right kind of page, okay? So we want to do this in our communities, express the value. The value is absolutely critical. Now, the third area that I want to dig into is I'm going to come back to incentives. And I think this is really, really important because incentives are a very, very natural element of how we as human beings operate. Now, do you remember earlier on when I was talking about the community participation framework, and we have the casual, the regular, and the core phases? And I said that incentives is how you move people from the casual to the regular and the regular to the core. Well, the reason why incentives work is that they're everywhere, right? We're very, very used to them, okay? You see them with Mileage Plus rewards, for example, airline rewards. How many of you have been into a coffee shop and, you buy you get your little coffee card, and when you get 10 stamps, you get a free coffee. It's rewards on things like Fitbit and video games, Karma on Reddit. These are all different examples of where incentives play a role. And what's interesting is that they work because our brain is wired up to want to be hunter-gatherers, right? If you go back thousands and thousands of years, we'd be looking to preserve enough food, enough medicine, so we could protect ourselves and our families, okay? And that part of the brain hasn't had an upgrade in a long time. So therefore, when we have an opportunity to get stuff, we naturally want to get it, okay? And that's one of the reasons why incentives and rewards work really well. Now, therefore, you're going to be thinking, okay, so we know incentives can move people forward and be more committed community members. How do we do that? Well, there's basically two ways in which you can focus on incentives. I call it stated and submarine. So let's first of all talk about stated incentives. So stated incentives is where you basically say, if you do this thing, you will get this thing. Okay, so for example, the GitHub Game Off. And the GitHub Game Off, they say, if you go and participate and you submit a game and you win the competition, you'll win these prizes. Another example is with HackerOne. If you go and participate as an active member of the community and you reach certain milestones, then you'll unlock certain opportunities within HackerOne. Okay. Another example will be Stack Overflow or Stack Exchange. Let's get rid of me. So you can see these badges on the left-hand side. So for example, the favorite question badge in the middle. If you have your question on Stack Exchange favorited by 25 users, you'll get that favorite question badge. And as you can see, 51.4 thousand people have been awarded that badge. So you're saying, if you do this thing, you'll get this thing. And I think this is a really, really powerful way to give people things to do, and incentives and gamification and badges are great ways to do that. However, I think that this is the slightly less interesting cousin of the much more interesting submarine method of delivering incentives and rewards. And let me explain how this works. So this is where you basically say, I'm going to try and detect the right kind of behavioral outcomes that I want my audience to showcase, that I want them to do, and then I'll detect that automatically with the computer, and then I will recognize and reward them as a human being. Okay, so let me give you an example of this. Okay, so one of my favorite platforms for building communities is called Discourse, and in Discourse you've got this notion called trust levels. And when people go up these trust levels, so when they start as a brand new registered user on Discourse, they're trust level 0. No one knows who they are. It's a little bit like someone knocking on your door at 10 o'clock at night. You don't know whether it's Auntie Jane or an axe murderer, right? You shouldn't let them in without trusting them first. Now, when they participate a certain amount, they go up to trust level 1. And this is basically reading a little bit, not spamming, just being a basic human being and spending about 15 minutes hanging out on the forum. But when they go up to trust level 2, this means they've read a lot. They've posted a certain amount. They've had some things liked. They've liked some certain things. And when they reach that level, what I like to do is I like to then post just a little bit of recognition where we say, congratulations to this particular person for all their amazing work. You've achieved our silver level, for example, or you've achieved, you basically brand that trust level essentially. This is a way of giving an intrinsic reward, of essentially giving recognition where you're saying, thank you for being an amazing part of our community. Now, they don't know what they need to do to achieve that level. This just comes out the blue. They just show up one day on the forum and lo and behold, they're being recognized as an amazing part of the community. It works really, really well. Another example is opensource.com. When people have written a certain number of articles for opensource.com, then they'll send them swag, backpacks and little trophies and this, that, and the other. You don't know what the requirements are. They just send it out, and it's a pleasant surprise. The same thing with Mattermost. When people often make their first contribution, they'll just randomly get a cup in the mail with their username on it. It's a really nice little submarine reward. Another example that I would say here is around opensource.com. Again, so if you are one of the top contributors to opensource.com, Red Hat will actually fly you out to come to a meeting in Raleigh, and you'll get to go to All Things Open and all kinds of interesting things, okay? So what I think is so amazing about this is it's this power of community. But communities are really complicated. They're really difficult to put together. They're really confusing, okay? And that's one of the reasons why I've developed like this community participation framework and simple incentives in which you can kind of keep people moving forward. Because remember what I said earlier on, it's all about building an amazing journey. If you build the very best journey, you'll deliver the very best community experience. Now, before I wrap up, I just want to mention something quickly that you might be interested in. So I wrote this book, People Powered, a little while ago. It came out in November. I'm really proud of it. It's been doing really well. It won a Business Book Award. It's got 5-star reviews currently on Amazon and Goodreads. It's a bestseller at Amazon and Porchlight, and people seem to be really liking it. I'm really proud of the response to it. So what I want you to do is to make sure that each of you can get a little bit of a taste of this. So I put together this pack. If you go to jonobacon.com/pack, then you can go and pop in your email address, and I'll send you a couple of free chapters from the book. It's about 50 pages worth of content. The first 2 chapters of the book. I'll also send you let me put me back on, hang on. I'll also send you 2 free audiobook chapters. So this is me reading it. I recorded it myself with my velvety English baritone. I'll also send you a bunch of templates and cheat sheets, and I regularly send out tons of tips and best practice. I'm not one of these people that just is constantly spamming people with sales emails. I just don't believe that. Every so often I'll send out a sales email for a training course or something, but 90% of the material that I send out is all about giving you really amazing content and value. I also provide free training, and I do mentoring sweepstakes where I'll provide free time so we can get on a call one-on-one. You can ask questions, all those kinds of things. So I just wanted to give you folks that offer right there so you can go and check it out. And again, feel free to get your questions in. I want to answer and be as available as much as possible. You can email as well. You can email me at jono@jonobacon.com. And thank you so much. It was really wonderful to be here, and have a wonderful day.